Economic inequality is the gap between the rich and the poor. How much some people have compared to how little others have. It is often engineered, not accidental, through a combination of systems, policies, and power structures that favor certain groups while disadvantaging others. Welcome to the Outsmart Secrets, your trusted source for practical, powerful, and easy-to-understand financial wisdom. We break down money matters in ways that make sense. Whether you're looking to grow your income, build lasting wealth, escape debt, or understand investing, you're in the right place. Before we dive into the 10 ways economic inequality can manifest and impact individuals, let's first take a moment to explore some key aspects of economic inequality. Income inequality. Income inequality is the difference in how much people actually earn. We're not just talking about paychecks. This includes salaries, bonuses, stock options, and even government benefits. Now imagine this. A CEO of a large corporation might earn $10 million a year, while a factory worker in the same company takes home just $25,000. That's not a small gap. That's a chasm. And it's a clear, real-world picture of how income is distributed in today's economy. But it doesn't stop there. These disparities shape access to housing, education, healthcare, and even retirement security. It grants wealthy individuals a significant advantage, enabling them to invest, seize opportunities, and take calculated risks with far greater confidence than those with limited resources. Wealth inequality. Wealth inequality refers to the vast differences in the ownership and accumulation of assets, such as savings, real estate, stocks, businesses, and inheritances. Unlike income inequality, which focuses on how much people earn, wealth inequality reveals how securely people can build and pass on financial stability. For instance, one family might own several properties, a diversified investment portfolio, and a thriving family business, giving them not just present-day comfort but also long-term security and the ability to pass on opportunities to the next generation. In contrast, another family may have little to no savings, live paycheck to paycheck, and struggle to cover emergencies, let alone invest or leave behind assets. This disparity in asset ownership widens over time, as wealth generates more wealth through appreciation, dividends, and tax advantages, while those without assets often fall deeper into financial vulnerability. True financial freedom isn't just about earning, it's about owning. Without access to wealth-building tools, families remain stuck in cycles of economic insecurity. Bridging the wealth gap requires addressing not just income, but long-term access to opportunities that allow everyone to build and retain assets. 3. Opportunity inequality. This refers to unequal access to quality education, healthcare, social networks, and financial resources, all of which significantly impact an individual's ability to improve their economic standing. A child from a wealthy neighborhood may attend top schools and colleges, while a child from a poor area may lack even basic resources. Here are 10 ways economic inequality is engineered to work against your financial freedom. 1. Tax policy and loopholes. Tax policy and loopholes refer to how governments design and implement tax systems, and the ways individuals or businesses legally minimize what they owe. Tax loopholes are provisions in the tax code that allow individuals or corporations to reduce their tax liabilities in ways that, while legal, may go against the intended spirit of the law. Individuals explore options or loopholes in order to reduce their tax liability by exploiting gaps, ambiguities, or complexities in tax law. They are not illegal, but they may go against the spirit of the law. A corporation might move profits to a country with lower taxes, a tax haven, through legal accounting methods, reducing the amount owed in its home country. Loopholes often benefit high-income individuals, corporations, those with access to skilled accountants or tax advisors. Wealth-friendly tax laws often allow the rich to pay lower effective tax rates than the middle or lower class. This can be either through capital gains. Capital gains are usually taxed lower than income, which will end up eventually benefiting investors more than workers. tax shelters, offshore accounts, and trust structures, which are usually used to legally avoid taxes. And finally, corporate loopholes that let large companies pay minimal or no taxes while small businesses bear the burden. For the wealthy and large corporations, these loopholes can result in massive tax savings, to the point where some billionaires end up paying a lower effective tax rate than middle-class workers. This creates a significant disparity in how the financial burden of running a country is distributed. On a broader scale, when such loopholes are overused, they can deprive governments of much-needed revenue, leading to budget shortfalls that hinder investment in essential public services such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure. This not only deepens economic inequality, but also limits opportunities for the less privileged. Ethically, the existence and exploitation of tax loopholes raise serious questions about fairness, particularly when those who benefit the most from a stable economic and legal system are contributing the least toward its maintenance. Lesson: for the wealthy and large corporations, tax loopholes can lead to massive savings, sometimes allowing billionaires to pay less in taxes than middle-class workers as a percentage of income. For the economy, when tax loopholes are overused, governments may face budget shortfalls, increasing inequality and reducing public investment. For fairness, tax loopholes raise ethical questions. Should those who benefit the most from the system contribute the least? Refer to our previous video on 7 ways the poor funds the rich for more information on how the rich explore tax systems to their favor. 2. Wage suppression. In today's economy, a growing divide is evident in the way income is distributed within companies. While CEO compensation has skyrocketed, often reaching tens or even hundreds of millions annually through salaries, bonuses, and stock options, wages for average workers have remained largely stagnant, barely keeping up with inflation. This disparity reflects a broader prioritization of profit maximization over employee well-being. Many companies further widen this gap by outsourcing labor to countries with cheaper labor costs or replacing human workers with automation and AI, all in an effort to reduce expenses and boost shareholder returns. At the same time, the suppression of labor unions, either through legal hurdles, intimidation, or strategic restructuring, diminishes workers' ability to collectively bargain for fair wages, better working conditions, and essential benefits. As a result, the bargaining power of the average worker continues to erode, deepening economic inequality and limiting upward mobility for the majority. When CEO pay skyrockets while wages for average workers stagnate, companies outsource labor to cheaper markets or replace it with automation, prioritizing profits over people. Union suppression reduces workers' ability to negotiate fair pay and benefits. These practices don't just impact corporate balance sheets, they directly affect the everyday lives of workers. Individuals face declining living standards, limited job security, and fewer opportunities for upward mobility. Without fair wages or collective bargaining power, many struggle to keep up with rising costs of living, save for the future, or invest in personal development. Ultimately, these systemic imbalances widen the gap between the wealthy and the working class, creating an economy that rewards a few while leaving the majority behind. Lessons: systemic imbalances in wages, labor rights, and economic opportunity reveal a critical truth. Personal financial growth cannot exist in isolation from the broader systems we operate within. To thrive financially, individuals must not only seek personal development and smart money habits, but also stay informed, advocate for fair policies, and understand how structural inequalities limit opportunity. Economic literacy and collective awareness are key tools for bridging the growing gap between the working class and the wealthy elite. 3. Unequal access to quality education. In many countries, access to quality education is closely linked to socioeconomic status. With well-funded schools often concentrated in affluent neighborhoods, children from low-income families are left with fewer academic resources and opportunities. This educational divide is further widened by the high cost of higher education. The few poor individuals that make it to go to school through loans are burdened with significant debt, while wealthier peers graduate debt-free, giving them a substantial head start in both career and wealth-building opportunities. Over time, this compounds economic inequality, as opportunities become increasingly reserved for those who started with an advantage. Closing this gap requires policies that equalize access to quality education and reduce the financial barriers that limit upward mobility. Lesson: economic mobility is deeply tied to access to quality education and financial freedom. When educational opportunities and outcomes are determined by a person's zip code or family wealth, the system reinforces inequality instead of leveling the playing field. To build a fairer society and a stronger economy, we must recognize that true progress starts with giving everyone, regardless of background, a fair shot at success through equal access to learning and opportunity. Number 4. Asset ownership and wealth transfer. Wealth inequality is significantly magnified by the difference in how income is earned and accumulated across social classes. The wealthy tend to own appreciating assets such as real estate, stocks, and businesses. Assets that not only retain value, but often grow over time, generating passive income and building long-term wealth. In contrast, lower-income individuals typically rely solely on earned wages, which are more vulnerable to inflation, job loss, and economic downturns, and rarely lead to wealth accumulation. Furthermore, generational wealth provides the rich with a major advantage. Inheritances, trust funds, early access to quality education, and powerful family connections offer them a head start in life that compounds over time. These structural advantages enable the wealthy to take risks, invest earlier, and capitalize on opportunities that are simply out of reach for those starting from scratch. This creates a cycle where the rich continue to get richer, not necessarily through harder work, but through ownership, access, and inheritance. Lesson: true financial security isn't built on wages alone, it's built on ownership. To break out of the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, one must learn to acquire appreciating assets and make money work for them. Relying solely on earned income limits your financial growth, while investing in assets like real estate, stocks, or a business opens the door to long-term wealth. Additionally, being intentional about creating generational wealth, even if starting small, can give your family a stronger financial foundation. The lesson is simple: don't just work for money. Build systems where money works for you and those who come after you. 5. Monopolization and market control. In many modern economies, powerful corporations exert disproportionate influence over the market by buying out smaller competitors, consolidating industries, and setting the terms that govern wages, prices, and access to consumers. This concentration of economic power not only stifles competition, but also restricts the ability of smaller businesses and new entrepreneurs to enter and thrive in the market. When large corporations dominate entire sectors, they can manipulate pricing, suppress wages, and create barriers to innovation by controlling supply chains, lobbying for favorable regulations, or leveraging economies of scale that smaller players simply cannot match. This results in reduced consumer choice, suppressed upward mobility for small business owners, and an overall economic structure that benefits a select few at the top, rather than encouraging broad-based opportunity. Lesson: to level the playing field, individuals must become more aware of how economic power shapes opportunity. It's not enough to just work hard. You need to understand the rules of the game and seek out niches, collaborative networks, and innovative strategies to compete. Financial and strategic literacy is key in a world where market dominance increasingly favors the powerful. Number 6. Political influence and lobbying. Wealthy individuals and large corporations often wield significant influence over political systems by funding political campaigns, financing think tanks, and lobbying lawmakers to pass legislation that serves their financial and strategic interests. Through this political spending, they help shape policies that include tax breaks for the wealthy, deregulation of industries, and the weakening of labor laws and consumer protections. These actions do not just skew economic opportunity, they reshape the system itself. When the wealthy influence the rules, policies are created that disproportionately benefit those at the top, such as reduced corporate tax rates, loopholes for offshore accounts, and relaxed environmental or labor regulations. Meanwhile, the broader population faces stagnant wages, limited job security, rising costs of living, and reduced access to quality education and healthcare. Over time, this results in a government that appears increasingly disconnected from the needs of its people, functioning more as a safeguard for elite wealth than as a promoter of public welfare. Lesson: informed citizenship is a form of financial defense. To protect your economic future, you must be aware of how politics shapes the economy and use your voice, through voting, advocacy, and education, to support policies that create fairness and opportunity for all, not just the privileged few. 7. Housing and urban planning. Gentrification and discriminatory housing policies such as redlining have long been tools of exclusion, systematically pushing low-income and marginalized communities out of neighborhoods that offer upward economic mobility. As wealthier individuals and investors move into urban areas, housing prices and property taxes rise sharply, effectively displacing existing residents who can no longer afford to live in those revitalized spaces. Meanwhile, historical practices like redlining, where banks and governments denied mortgages or services to residents in minority or low-income neighborhoods, have left deep scars, resulting in generational setbacks in wealth accumulation for affected families. Even today, the ripple effects are evident in land ownership laws and inflated real estate markets, which often make homeownership one of the most powerful wealth-building tools inaccessible for millions. This creates a vicious cycle where those without property remain renters, paying more over time without gaining equity, while the property-owning class continues to grow wealth through asset appreciation and tax advantages. Lesson: understanding housing dynamics is crucial to financial empowerment. Building wealth often starts with access to land and property, so staying informed about housing policies, seeking out first-time buyer programs, and advocating for equitable urban development can help level the playing field and prevent displacement in the long run. 8. Unequal access to financial tools. The financial system is often rigged in favor of those who already have money, leaving the poor to navigate a minefield of costly and exploitative services. Individuals with limited income and assets frequently resort to high-interest payday loans, pawn shops, or rent-to-own services to meet immediate needs. These services may offer quick cash, but they trap users in cycles of debt due to exorbitant interest rates and fees. Meanwhile, the wealthy have access to low-interest loans, favorable credit terms, and expert financial advisors who help them grow their wealth strategically. Adding to the imbalance, credit scoring systems, which determine access to housing, employment, and loans, often penalize people for being poor rather than being financially irresponsible. If someone has never had a credit card or struggles with inconsistent income, they're labeled high risk, even if they manage their limited resources wisely. This creates a two-tier system, one where the rich get richer through strategic leveraging, and another where the poor are punished simply for being poor. Lesson: to break free from this cycle, financial literacy is essential. Understanding how credit works, seeking nonprofit financial counseling, and using community-based savings programs can help low-income individuals build credit safely and access better financial opportunities, ultimately shifting power back into their hands. Number 9. Globalization without protection. In many developing countries, the economic structure is skewed to serve the interests of foreign corporations and domestic elites, rather than the needs of the broader population. International trade agreements, IMF-imposed structural adjustment programs, and foreign aid conditions often come with strings attached that prioritize deregulation, privatization, and austerity measures. While these policies are framed as efforts to promote economic stability and global integration, they frequently result in weakened labor protections, slashed social services, and the collapse of vital local industries. For example, small-scale farmers or local manufacturers may find themselves unable to compete with cheap, subsidized imports from richer nations, effectively driving them out of business. At the same time, multinational corporations extract resources and profits from these countries with minimal reinvestment into infrastructure, education, or healthcare. The result is a system where economic growth on paper doesn't translate into improved living conditions for the average citizen. Instead, it consolidates wealth and decision-making power in the hands of a few, both domestically and abroad. Lesson: true economic empowerment in developing nations requires reclaiming control over local resources, protecting domestic industries, and implementing policies that prioritize human development over corporate profits. Without this shift, long-term economic independence and upward mobility for the majority will remain out of reach. Social narratives and cultural framing. We don't just grow up learning math and science. We grow up absorbing stories about money, success, failure, work, and worth. These stories aren't always written in textbooks. They're embedded in the movies we watch, the news we consume, the traditions we uphold, and the casual advice passed down through generations. This is what's known as social narratives and cultural framing, the invisible forces that influence how we perceive opportunity, wealth, and even ourselves. For example, in some cultures, entrepreneurship is encouraged from a young age, while in others, a safe government job is seen as the pinnacle of success. In certain societies, wealth is admired and aspired to, while in others it may be viewed with suspicion or guilt. Similarly, the narrative of the self-made millionaire glorifies individual effort, but often overlooks inherited advantages, access to networks, or systemic inequality. These narratives shape our financial decisions, whether we save or spend, take risks or play it safe, invest or avoid money conversations altogether. They influence how we judge others and ourselves, often reinforcing economic hierarchies and justifying disparities as natural or deserved. Understanding these social and cultural narratives is crucial. Why? Because if you're not aware of the script you've been handed, you might unconsciously follow a financial path that doesn't serve you, or even limits you. By questioning and reframing these inherited stories, we can create new personal and collective narratives that promote equity, empowerment, and informed financial choices. Lessons. The beliefs we hold about money, success, and status are rarely neutral. They're shaped by the cultures and communities we grow up in. And if left unexamined, these inherited stories can limit our potential. In summary, economic inequality is not just the result of personal failure or market forces. It's often deliberately shaped by decisions made at the top. The wealthy engineer rules, influence systems, and create feedback loops that make it easier to protect and grow their wealth, while the majority are left with fewer tools to climb up. In our next video, we'll dive into practical, actionable steps you can take to protect your finances and thrive, even in the face of economic inequality. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know which of these realities stood out to you the most.